starting. Okay, and you can go ahead and tell us a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, so I'm Adam Guest. I'm the author of the Many Worlds series. Currently there are 2 books in that series, Worldlines and The Futility of Vengeance. I'm 36. I live with my partner, Sarah. We've been together nearly 10 years, but we're not married yet. But we do have 2 children. We have a son, Jacob, who's 6, and Jessica, who is 3, going on about 30. So when I'm not writing, by trade, I am an IT consultant. What that means for me is I design interfaces that allow incompatible softwares to speak to each other in a non-native language. So that's my day job. And then the writing is on top.
Yeah, it sounds like a lot of interest. So what inspired you to pursue writing?
Sorry, Zara, the sound has stopped. I can't hear you. Oh, that's it. It's come back through now.
Okay.
Yeah, sorry, your lips are moving, but I couldn't hear you.
Okay, perfect. So what inspired you to pursue writing among your other career interests?
The interest in writing came from a young age. My dad was, and still is, disabled. So he was unable to work when I was a child. But he was very artistic. He made dolls' houses, and he made hanging baskets for the gardens and garden benches and things like that. So he was very skilled in the crafts. But he also had a passion for writing himself, and he wrote a few children's stories about a rescue helicopter called Choppy. They never got published because at the time he was ready to query. It was the same time, this would have been back end of the 80s, early 90s, when Sarah Ferguson's series, Budgie the Little Helicopter, came out, and they were considered too similar. So Dad shelved that. But I'm the eldest child, and at 6 or 7, I want to do what my dad wants to do. So I try and write my own choppy stories and things like that. And it kind of went from there. So that passion never left. And it kind of led into my education, my choices through school and things like that. So yeah, it was from a young age. It was child experience. It was seeing Dad writing, and it was going, I want to do that. And it came from there.
Yeah, that's really cool. So you've talked about your healthy personal life and now your career interests. So how do you balance it all? Because there's so many people who might want to start writing careers, but they have so many other things going on.
I don't balance it really. So I'm a freelance consultant, which means my work is very on and off. I'll be really busy for 6 weeks, then I'll have nothing to do for a fortnight. When I'm working full time, I barely get time to write because the day job is taxing mentally, and so is writing, because you have to be creative, and I can't do it when I'm fatigued. I'm also autistic, so I struggle to, you'll notice I'm struggling to look at the camera. But yeah, so I struggle for my brain to switch from one thing to the other. When I finish work, my brain continues in work mode, and I struggle to go to the writing. The good part of that is when I then start writing, I tend to make quite quick progress, because again, I can't switch off from it until it's done. So Worldlines and The Futility of Vengeance came about in quite quick succession because I'd got a period of downtime from work. The last 9 months, however, I've been based in the UK. I've been working for a company in Belgium, and finding the time to write has been very, very difficult, which is why the 3rd book in the series, Between the Lines, has been delayed. But I've now got a few weeks downtime, so I'm back to it, and I'm hoping that by about the end of March, the 3rd book in the series will be ready to send to an editor.
Oh, that's really exciting.
Yeah, it's also very, as I say, because we've got the kids as well. It's not like I can sit here of an evening once I finish work and write. They want my time as well. Sarah needs some support with the kids. So yeah, when I'm busy, writing becomes lower on the priority list, unfortunately.
Yeah, no, but that makes sense. That's how life is. But you've mentioned your formal education and your biographies and things on your website. So how is your formal education translated to your writing?
probably not in the way I'd have expected. So growing up through my teenage years, I wanted to be a journalist, and specifically a sports journalist. So my academic qualifications were in mathematics, which was my strongest academic subject, media, information technology, and when I was 16, I did voluntary work for a local evening newspaper, and that got me an interview for an apprenticeship with them. And I went for the interview, and I'm 16 or 17. I've never had a job interview before, and I remember the gentleman that interviewed me. He said to me, he goes, "Do you consider yourself to be a nosy person?" I am nosy, and obviously now I realise that journalists are nosy. But saying you're nosy in a job interview when you're 16 or 17 is it doesn't seem like it's a good answer to give. So I said no. Ultimately, I didn't get that apprenticeship, and I ended up working for a high street bank, and so the maths and the IT qualifications were quite important there. And I had 5 or 6 different roles within the bank over a period of 3 or 4 years. None of them really what I wanted to do. And then when I got the chance to train internally on their graduate program, I switched to IT development. I don't have a degree, but so they took on 7 IT graduates and me as an internal candidate, because I'd worked in all the different areas. I knew what all the data meant, so I could attack it from a different area. And then, I've been consulting since then. So what I've been doing didn't really relate to my academic qualifications. Now I'm starting to use the skills that I learned when I was studying English literature and things like that. That's something that I'm able to bring home now, albeit it was a very long time ago now.
Yeah. So I think like one thing I found really interesting was the subject matter of your book. So what prompted you to write about the many worlds theory specifically?
There were 3 motivating factors for it. One was I'm fascinated by dreams anyway. And what intrigues me about them is the clarity you have within them and the complete lack of sense they make when you wake up. It's very rare in a dream you go, hang on, this is silly, this doesn't work. So I've tried to portray that in the books. So that was what started this. The second one is a little bit more difficult to talk about because it was inspired by my grandmother and her battle with dementia. There's we've lost her now, and there's a dedication to her in the front of Worldlines, and that she became very difficult to communicate with in her later years because she was talking about events that hadn't happened. She was frightened to go upstairs in her house because there was a man up there, and these were recurring themes. And it's very easy in that scenario to dismiss what that person is experiencing, thinking that they're old, they're losing their mind and whatnot. But whatever it might have been to me and to the rest of our family, it was real to her. She saw it, she felt it, she experienced it. And it was a level of reality that we can't relate to. And her reality was as alien to us as ours had become to her. And I tried to put sense to it. What is she experiencing? What is she going through? How can I relate to her? And there was nothing really that allowed me to do that until the third factor, which was I read a topic. There's an online post which I recommend if you're interested in the subject matter that you can read. And it's an article called "The 10 Mind-Bending Implications of the Many Worlds Theory," which basically ties all this together. And it's about things like, the example it gives is if you're watching something like American football and they throw and the other player goes to catch the ball and then suddenly it'll slip through his fingers and you'll drop it. That's a 1 in 100 chance. And in 99 worlds, he'll catch it and in 1 he won't. And it explains it in these sorts of terms. And suddenly I felt like it allowed me to bring everything that I'd thought together hang on a minute, maybe these things are all interlinked. And I searched for literary fiction on this topic and didn't find any. Now, I'd had the characters of Gary, Michelle, and Sinead planned out in my head for a number of years, but I hadn't placed them anywhere. I couldn't just write a crime novel or a sci-fi novel that had been done 100 times before. So when I realised that this didn't exist, I suddenly felt I knew where I wanted my characters to be, and it all came together from there. So this was about mid-2015. So I started saving money so that I could take time out of work, and I'd then be able to write the story, which I was finally able to do 2019. So yeah, that's how that came about.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's like a really interesting, like, niche topic, and I mean, it's gotten more popular now, but in 2015, it was definitely like super, super new.
What concerned me as well was, because this didn't exist, if I didn't write it, someone else was going to.
Exactly. So you got in on the ground.
Yeah, I didn't want to miss the boat on that one. So.
So, what was your purpose in writing Worldlines specifically? Like, what is the message that you were trying to convey to readers, or like maybe the overarching life lesson?
I wanted it to be something that a reader would remember. But when they finish the book, they continue to think about it. What fascinated me was that all the theories in the book are real theories, but the solutions are not. They are fiction. They are figments of my imagination. There's nothing that's specified in that book that is proven scientifically. But there's nothing that's disproven scientifically either. And I find that quite tantalizing. You know, this is a work of fiction, but we don't understand how reality works, and this might not be a million miles from it. And the idea that a reader could see that and go, "Oh, yeah, I can relate to that." You might see a news article where someone has committed a crime completely out of character, and you go, what's caused them to flip like that? I quite like the idea that this might have something to do with it. They go, I don't remember, I don't know, and everyone always goes, oh yeah, of course you don't remember. You're not going to remember that. You're not going to admit to it. You're just going to plead ignorance. But is it possible that they really don't? I don't know. I'm just theorising, and I liked the way that it came together in a story, and the idea of Gary committing a crime in one world line and another him suffering from it in another. I felt that was a story that needed to be told, and I thought it was something that would make the reader think. It's not something that you can read. You can't read a chapter a night. It's something that you do need to read in 2 or 3 sittings. So once you've got past what is admittedly a slow start by design, you then might want to put it down. And I think that slow start kind of lulls people in, and they go, what's going on here? And then suddenly you hit chapter 7 when Gary stabs Sinead in the black line, and suddenly it's, oh, okay, I didn't see that coming, and then it kicks on from there. So yeah, that's what I was aiming for, and I think from the feedback from your readers, it's worked to a degree. There's been a lot of positive feedback for it, which I'm grateful for, because that feedback motivates me to write future stories. If nobody read it, there'd be no point. So if people are reading it, then yeah, I want to continue to write it.
Yeah, I mean, I think that you achieved that goal, because when I read it, I was thinking about it for a few days after too. I was like, it's weird to think about that many worlds theory and how it might like apply to your life. So aside from,
can I ask, has it changed how you view your dreams, or do you not remember your dreams?
I used to remember my dreams. I don't as much now, but it has changed my viewpoint on dreams a little bit, because like for the few days after when I did have dreams, I'd be thinking about, like, is it possible that I could have been like living a different lifetime? Is it possible for a dream to actually be a different type of universe? But I think for me, at least personally, like, your book had a bigger impact on me thinking about how my little decisions could change the like trajectory of my life overall. That was like the main takeaway I had.
And as a writer, I think if you can read that book and you can take something away from it that impacts your life in a positive way, there is no better feeling for me than knowing you've had that effect on someone who you don't know.
Yeah, I think that's a really great aspect of writing. So kind of like, I guess, building on that. So what is your favorite aspect of writing?
I I like the early stages of the process. Um, I despise editing. I hate marketing, but I do very much like the planning process. How is it going to get from beginning to end? Um, and the best feeling I had when I was writing Worldlines, um, I didn't write it as you read it. So I wrote the black line first. So chapter 6 was the first chapter written. Um, and I've got the end-to-end plan of how I wanted it to hang together, but all the nuances and all the detail weren't there. And what I was concerned about was that if I wrote it from chapter 1 to chapter 24, unconsciously, what happens in the black line would be influenced by what I'd written in another one. Because I'd not written the blue line yet, the black line was standalone. So I wrote the black line, the red line, and the blue line as separate novellas, and then bolted them together at the end. When I wrote chapter 8, which is the chapter where Gary is arrested at the party in the blue line, and I slotted that in between 7 and 9, which had been written for about 6 months, and it just worked. That was, you know, that was a fuzzy feeling. It seems strange to say, but the adrenaline pumped when I read that back, 7, 8, and 9 together, and it fit together. I'm starting to get some over this now. I'm quite excited by this. So yeah, that was good. But on a more general level, planning that beginning to end journey is very rewarding, because once you know how that's going to end, once you know how your story's going to end and how it starts, you have some idea of how you're going to go. If you start writing and I'll do this on the fly and I'll see where I end up, you could go anywhere, and it's very difficult then to tie a storyline back in. So yeah, that to me, getting that full plan and going, right, okay, I know how I can get from there to there to there to there. That's rewarding for me, and I can go, right, okay, now I can go and draft it out. And at that point, the story almost writes itself.
Yeah, I think connecting everything can be pretty difficult. So what is your advice for aspiring writers based on your personal experiences?
Um, I wrote an article on this for another author, an American gentleman called Stony DeGator. This will sound arrogant, but let me explain. I would suggest primarily you ignore all advice. And the reason I say that, I compare writing and the books with parenting and the children, to use as an analogy. So more people have got children than have written a book, so hopefully people will relate to what I'm saying here. But you're expecting your first child. You have no idea what's going to happen. When you buy these self-help parenting books, things like 100 great parenting tips, and your child will arrive and you'll read the book, and of those 100 tips, 5 or 6 of them will really hit home. They're talking directly to me. This is us. But the other 90 odd will have no bearing whatsoever, and you won't realise this until you've tried it and it hasn't worked. At that point, you then get very stressed and agitated, and you're like, am I a bad parent? Am I doing something wrong? Is there something wrong with my child? And the answer is usually no. You just haven't found what works for you. And you don't realise this until you have child number 2, when the advice that worked for child number 1 is no longer relevant. Child number 2 is a completely different animal. They're not going to, that things that failed before will now work. Things that worked before won't. And at that point, you realise that all advice is useful to someone, but most of it is not going to be relevant for you. So to bring that back to writing, I would recommend for writers not to get too hung up when advice they're given doesn't work. Because you will ask a writer for advice and they'll say, I recommend you write every day. And your life won't allow you to write every day. And you'll feel you're not cut out to be a writer, or you're not able to do it because you can't do what writers do. Or they'll say, you need to do it out of habit, or the other one is to be to be a regular reader. You must read lots of books to be a successful writer. I can't read when I'm writing. So once I start writing the novel, I don't read until I've finished it. I listen to audiobooks, that's a little bit different. But in terms of reading, I can't do that when I'm writing because I can't invest in another author's characters while I'm trying to develop my own. So they are two big pieces of writing advice, and I don't follow either because neither of them work for me. What works for me is being able to say, okay, I'm going to write on a day when I've not got any work, because if I've not got any work and I've not got any for 2 or 3 days, I can focus on this and I don't have to switch off from it. That works for me. It won't work for everyone else. So yeah, if you're looking to become a writer and writers give you advice and it doesn't work, it doesn't matter. It doesn't mean you're not cut out for it. It doesn't mean you're going to be bad at it. You just haven't yet found what works for you.
Yeah, I think
does that make sense as an explanation?
Definitely makes sense. Yeah, because like there's all these general advice things you read, but they don't really apply to every like situation, like you're saying.
And going back to the parenting books, you read things like, if your child won't sleep, swaddle them in a blanket, get their arms in. Both mine hated that. As soon as you put their arms in there, they're fighting, trying to get out, they're screaming. It made the situation worse. And then, with breastfeeding or bottle feeding, my son wouldn't. Breastfeeding is encouraged, but my son didn't take to it, and he fed better from a bottle. And then, my partner was, I've not been able to breastfeed. Am I a bad mum? Is he going to suffer? No, he hasn't suffered. He's been perfectly fine. But there's so much pressure put on because of, this is what you're meant to do. But they're not all the same. And it's the same with writing.
Yeah. So that's all the questions I had for you. But did you have anything else that you wanted to add?
Just a thank you, really. I say that the exposure that the book has received through Online Book Club has been excellent. I say the struck up a good relation with Scott and the guys on the support desk. I've had a few email exchanges with Sarah and Charlie for his marketing. It's all been fantastic. So it's all good. And even the bad reviews, even the bad feedback, I appreciate that, because if someone goes, this is brilliant, yes, it's really, really good. But what it doesn't do is give me a lot to work on. If someone says, I didn't like this element of the book, and there is a collective feedback where, a significant set of people are going, I didn't like this, it gives me something that I can improve and something that I can work on. So yeah, if you thought the book was great, thank you, I appreciate it. If you thought the book was terrible, thank you for telling me, because it gives me something that I can improve on going forward. So yeah, thank you to all the readers.
Yeah, and thank you for taking the time to meet with me today. And for anybody who might be watching the YouTube video, make sure to like, comment, and subscribe, and I'll see you guys next week. Okay.